welcome in this afternoon session in the our World University Summit. We are going to discuss on industry-academia collaboration from philanthropy, community impact, and employability point of view. And for this, we have professors. We have Professor Pier, who is president of the Center for Higher Education, International University, Italy. We have Professor Kevin Grant, Dean, Stirling Management School, University of Stirling, United Kingdom. We have Professor Sinha, who is a founder and chairperson of Harappa Education. He's a renowned person. We have Professor Dr. Mark Smith, Vice Chancellor and President. I welcome all of you on the behalf of Jindal Global University. Professors, we have planned to discuss in the session about the industry-academia collaboration, which is nicely put it here. I would like to set, first of all, a few points here that what exactly we would like to discuss here. So under the industry-academia collaboration, we will try to focus on the philanthropy, community impact, and employability issues. A university is intrinsically linked to the society in which it is located. In both education and research, interaction with other actors in society and industry on a sustained basis for the Christians. While teaching is an important activity in them, universities are also carrying responsibility to push the frontiers of knowledge through research, collaborative partnership with their wider community at local, national, and international level are the natural progressions of their mission of education and research. Collaboration between industry and academia has long been acknowledged as a critical component of efficient national innovation system worldwide. The origins of eminent universities are global. They advance their academic mission by attracting scholars and students internationally, who in their pursuit of the knowledge lead the way to inventions, discoveries, and descriptive technologies. Such inventions open new ways to improve the human conditions. With limitations in public funding of universities, privately funded universities and research has risen, and boundaries of knowledge creations are no longer confined to the university spaces and extend to research labs of multidimensional corporations. For universities, philanthropy remain a driving force in this process. The university providing the talent and research to enable individuals, companies, the government to successfully harness the advances in our community that must remain to pivotal goal to the society impact and employability grows in the leap of the mountain. Therefore, this session will examine that what can universities do to harness their institutional strength to remain at the vanguard of the research and development and provide intellectual and social leadership as they collectively navigate this in the new era of onset where now fourth industrial revolution is coming now. This session will try to focus on this session and we'll discuss that how can universities effectively engage with the industry and the business, NGOs and other stakeholders for sustainable increasement in the volume and the impact of non-public sector funded research. The wave of philanthropy can be driving and forces in the mission. What are the major challenges which is faced by the higher education institution, basically when we go for the collaboration in terms of their non-academic partner? So this is a key area where we would like to discuss. We have discussed a lot. We have evidently we have seen that industry academia interface is a very initial, very important part where industry brings, academia brings, and they collaborate together and they can produce something which is actually industry need and universities are providing. But there are a lot of challenges. There are a lot of challenges in there. So the first point which I would like to put forward here in front of the eminent speakers, that there are some main driving forces, you can say factors. So what are the main factors that can ensure a successful partnership between industry and academia? And how can you describe the main drivers of this partnership in the context of contemporary world? I would like to ask Professor Pier, if you can put on some light on this thing. Professor Pier.
Yeah, thank you very much. It is, as you said, a fundamental topic for the university life. Let me make a very short introduction on my personal experience and experience of my university. Actually, I'm working and my research activities are focused on food and biotechnologies. So I work in a very applied sector in which interaction with the entrepreneurs and with other stakeholders of the production system or company system are pretty strong. Second, my university, Università Cattolica del Sacro Cuore, is the biggest private university of Europe. And so we are in a situation that is slightly different from the majority of European universities. We are very little funded by the government. And so tuition fees and research projects from institutions and from companies are the main incomes of our university. So taking consideration this point, if the question is what are the main factors that can ensure a successful partnership between universities and the major stakeholders, in particular the industry system, I think that we can set three different points. The first one is that universities nowadays have not only one horizon, but at least two different horizons. The first one is generally located in the country or in the region where the university is present. But we are more and more open to the international system. We are more or less obliged to work in an international manner. The second point that I would like to highlight is that if in this context, if you want to enhance and implement as much as possible the industry and academia interactions, we need to think to have a joint benefit for both. I come from Europe, where we have a long history of, let me say, sometimes forced collaboration between your companies and universities. Research centers, if you want to apply for an Horizon Europe grant, we are more or less obliged to have in the consortium or research project companies. So I think it's important, and maybe we discuss later, that the joint benefit is for companies and for industries are the basis for that. And then let me say that is the third pillar is the societal impact. In Europe, we have developed in the last years what is called RRI, Responsible Research and Innovation. This is a clear framework in which we have to work. So any kind of interaction should have a strong impact on society in terms of innovation, in terms of better life for our citizens, and so on. So taking in consideration these three pillars, we can try to define a strategies for increase company and university collaborations.
Yeah, definitely, Professor. It's interesting, but still, that how can we describe this main drivers of this partnership in the context of contemporary world?
Well, I think that the main description from my point is to make what is called, what I try to highlight as a common or joint benefit for all the partners, whether we are just two, companies and academia, or we have also the institutions inside. Where we need this joint benefit. We are coming from a number of experience, let me say in the last 15, 20 years when the triple helix concept was developed, in which at the end, the successful of these triple helix, and let me say that working with DNA, sometimes I think that triple helix is not very efficient, but in this triple helix, did not lead to real impact in technology and knowledge transfer from academia to companies. And part of this problem is related to the research system. Scientists, hard scientists, most of the time like to do what was called apply research not applicable. So I have a very good idea in my mind, but there's no view to apply it practically for a new product, for a new system, for a new service in the real world. So we need that company, that researchers in university should learn what kind of research can be really focused for an impact on the society and on the companies. And on the other side, most of the time, the companies, even from small, medium enterprises up to big transnational corporations, they think that, okay, these are people in university, they just produce nice idea, but nothing that can be really transferred in practical innovation. Only if we can broken these two ideas and try to put together in the same table, around the same table, these people, we can develop interesting products. So patenting, development of spin-off companies, startup companies, joint and long-term collaboration with industries, I think are the major driver for reaching this goal.
Yeah, definitely. So yes, definitely when we talk about this, key pillars for making this partnership successful, definitely industry and academia, it has on role. When we talk about the successful innovations across the globe, I would like to understand here from the experts, Professor Grant, I would like to engage you if you can discuss something on what are some examples, some successful examples of this type of innovation where joint initiative has been taken between the industry and academia, and you as witness of that, of this mutual collaboration and benefit of these stakeholders. Professor Grant.
Okay, many thanks for that introduction again. I'd like to thank my colleague for their very enriched comments already. For me, I think what we should be doing with the academia and the business connectivity and partnerships is all about health and well-being for the region and for the society. So some good examples of that to drive economic growth predominantly is really to try and pay off some of this pandemic cost that's affecting all of us across the globe, and it has to be paid back somehow. So we've been using that very much as an impetus for the three examples that I'll give you in the next few minutes. But fundamentally, the first thing that we did was to try and create some sort of safe space where we could bring industry, business and government and academics together. And that was really designed to share our knowledge base, to create some sort of consensus to try and wrestle with the different agendas that everybody was having, and to start looking at this innovation of how what we can bring both at a sectoral level, because obviously, for example, in Scotland, for me, I'm quite rural, as well as working in the cities, etc. The main thing that we did was look at attitude and mindset. So that's the really first take-home message that we've been doing of late, particularly up in Scotland. We got to work with all the Scottish business schools to try and do something for Scotland, but it's really about attitude change and mindset change, much more towards entrepreneurial mindset, because most of our universities are really strong with guest lectures, applied consultancy projects, KTPs, and that's what I call the enterprise sort of concept. Really what we're going now here is the entrepreneurial mindset, that confidence, that belief. And that's what we felt a lot of our businesses and our academics and students didn't quite have. They got the access, they got the support, they got the awareness, they got the enrichment, but they just didn't have that confidence and that attitude. So your specific question to me was what sort of examples? The first thing we did was we took a whole bunch of successful entrepreneurs. We put them through a 10-week online training program to help them become better educators. Not academics, but educators. Then they're being used as entrepreneurs in residence or professors of practice that some institutions use. And they're now working with staff, students, alumni, and the local region. A good example would be industrial parks. My university has an industrial park, but really it's a landlord model. So we've used our entrepreneurs in residence as a way of challenging my own university to say, surely we should have a supply chain at people at different stages of their development, And rather than making it a landlord model, make it sector specific. So in our case, it's environmental. So we're moving the industrial park into the whole supply chain for environmental, so companies can cross-fertilize, learn and support from one another, very much organic, with the academics coming in, with student support and with government support coming in. So that E squared, we call it, which was taking these very successful entrepreneurs and upskilling them some general pedagogic knowledge of how to impart this knowledge to those who need it. The other one that we've been doing is the Help to Grow scheme as part of the United Kingdom, which is a multi-million-pound project. In Scotland, there are only 2 providers, Stirling being one of them. This time we've taken the SMEs in the programme, working with senior mentors and academics, all through case study approaches. The key to this is an implementation development plan. So we haven't focused on startup, we've focused on scale up, because we feel that's the biggest gap in our particular society. A 1% change in their sales revenue gives the UK Treasury, or the Scottish Treasury, £350 million extra. So rather than creating yet more startups, there's 200 agencies in Scotland who do this really well, that gap to start shaping and developing those new unicorns. But that required new organisational forms. And I had to break away from the traditional university systems. And I also had to break away from the traditional business systems. So we created new organisational forms that were able to do that knowledge consensus, innovation consensus, and consensus of where we were going. But we also do the guest speakers, the master classes, the real projects. We also do the mentoring and the coaching. We just take that for granted now. But that attitudinal change, that confidence, and that belief that entrepreneurialism is real and it is a profession. And that's the way we've been taking it, my 3 examples. Thank you.
Professor. Yeah, Professor Grant, you raised very interesting point here about this theoretical framework of triple helix model of innovation, where we bring academia, industry, and government all together on same platform in order to foster economic and social development. But this triple helix model, where we bring academia, industry, and government all together, it has its own challenges. So I would like to know from your side that how do you see what sort of practical challenges you have seen bringing all these pillars all together, making it successful and harmonious collaboration between these 3 industry, academia, and government points?
It's a very good question, Krishan. It's basically taken about 18 months prior to the pandemic of managed counselling. So we had to go around all the business schools and all the universities' different agendas, and we asked everybody to park their guns before they came into the meeting. So it wasn't about ego. It wasn't about the institutional status. It wasn't about this was a large business versus a micro business. So we asked everybody to park, their big guns at the door. We then had a facilitated discussion with one of Scotland's leading entrepreneurs, supported by the Hunter Foundation, which is a philanthropic organisation. So we were able to use these people's skill at bringing people's values to the table. So rather than playing institutional agendas, we then moved it up a level to the more meso level of trying to work out what was right for the region, what was right for the country. That was then supported by resources from central government and the universities. We also got a university to act as the governance model, who weren't part of the delivery model. So that kept that clear blue water in terms of who was controlling the resources, who could access the resources. But more importantly, we created a separate legal entity, which was made up of the academics and the business community as that governance board. And we felt that was a much better way of dealing with the internal conflict, because not every university is entrepreneurial. They may claim it, but they're not really. And also each businesses might claim that they're open to persuasion and they're open to work with academics. When they're not, there's still that fear factor of working with, say, Professor Smith, given his esteemed background at Lancaster and now at Southampton. So there's that fear factor. So we broke that down, but more importantly, we used the students as the glue. So it moved away from Kevin's research record or Kevin's desire for whatever to the students. So we used the students as the fabric, the systems and the glue to really help our local SMEs and the students. Then we built on that success, but that independent organization set within a university governance with no university controlling it, we felt was the best way forward. But more importantly, we didn't use the triple helix, we used the quadruple helix. We got the community involved. And we felt as an anchor institution, that was important. And I'm sure my colleague, Professor Smith, will be able to give you much more better insight into an anchor institution than I can. Does that help answer your question, Krishan?
Yeah, definitely, Professor Grant, definitely. I would like to extend the same thing. Like we talk about this industry, academia, and government, coming all together at a same platform. They are different stakeholders, but their purpose, their ultimate objective is same, to help the society and community. Governance, government to the policy, education, industry. But again, ultimate objective of industry is making profit. So question arises here. I would like to request Professor Sinha to put light some thought on this, that what are actually building, which is meaningful collaboration between industry and academia, and how can we strike a balance? That's a very important point. Balance between academic and commercial interest, because when industry comes, they have their commercial interest, and academia has a different interest. So it's a difficult to managing and balancing between these two, one at the commercial interest and at the academic interest. So how to make a strike balance between the academic and the commercial interest when we are talking about the industry and academic collaboration? Professor Sinha.
Thank you, Krishan. You raise an important point, and I think that in some ways, by asking the question, you've answered the question, in that you have to strike a balance. And that balance has to be struck by someone who plays that balancing role. It could be somebody from the university or the educational institution, or it could be somebody from the world of business or industry, as it may be, as the case may be. Somewhere, somebody has to be the orchestrator, the orchestra director, the catalyst to make that. I like the idea of the quadruple helix. Kevin took it from triple to quadruple, and I like bringing in the community and society in it too, because obviously you can't ignore that fourth element. But let me give you concrete examples and also delve a little bit deeper why you need that balance. You need that balance because we tend to dichotomize or tend to put industry and academia at two extremes. That was inherent in your question. That, for example, it's true that business is for profit, but it's also true, Krishan, as you know, that there is a lot of philanthropy happening in these profitable institutions as well. So, for example, in India, as you know, Krishan, but some of our colleagues from around the world may not know, every corporation has to contribute a certain amount of money to what is called corporate social responsibility, and it's 2% of their average profits over the last 3 years. So now there's a substantial amount of money to be tapped, which is not in commercial interest. While some people may do some lip service to this, most people genuinely want to contribute towards a cause. So the fact is that industry is not only about profits, and a lot of people who are not just contributing through these CSR funds are also trying to create products that benefit humanity or that attack a larger problem. That is, products that are more sustainable, green, and so on. Equally, on the academic side, I dare say that, our professors can be very commercially minded too. Several professors have founded some very successful companies in which they own equity. And there are several professors who have their own startups and so on. So I do think that there are aspirations of both the university and academia being more like each other. But therein lies the problem. Because we put people at extremes, we see each other at extremes. The real way I have found that has been helpful in making this work is somebody who is trying to build trust between the two parties, because the trust is where it is lacking. And if you bring in the triple helix of the government, at least in India, government doesn't trust private philanthropy and private universities because they think that, you know, the private universities might be misleading our students and gouging them with high fees and not delivering quality and so on and so forth, which is why our education in India is very highly regulated. Communities too are also wary of universities because they see them as expensive institutions where their children have to pay a lot of money and not sure of what the outcomes would be. So there is an inherent lack of trust, I feel, that has been there, you know, in all of these various stakeholders. And that trust leads to 3-4 deficits. One is there's always a mismatch in expectations. So, you know, a philanthropist or an industry partner on a project that, you know, Kevin might be doing would have an expectation that something will get done of, you know, you'll train 1 million entrepreneurs in 5 years, right? And, you know, they are very driven by outcomes and they're very driven by results and targets and goals, whereas universities are very much more like, hey, we'll make a great effort, we'll do a great job. Our job is to create the spirit and the learning and the change, but not really how do we guarantee that you'll get those outcomes? Hey, we are educators at the end of the day. So there's a clash right there, which is a mismatch in expectation with all good intentions. There's also a clash in terms of how you will do things, because at the end of the day, a university educates, right? You can't suddenly become a business enterprise where you're launching many entrepreneurs and startups. So and the how fast you will scale up, and so how and by what time. So I think that element starts to create conflict. And the third is this inherent lack of respect. I must say that I find that there's a lot of academics, and I was one once, feel a certain level of disdain for all these business types. You know, take their money, but what do they know, right? They don't really know how research is to be done, or that, you know, how universities operate, and we need to do more basic stuff. Who cares about applied stuff? Equally, the business guys feel that, you know, academics are fuddy-duddy and what can they contribute, and they are in their ivory towers and far removed from the reality of the real world. So all these misconceptions, misperceptions contribute to this lack of trust. Now, I don't want to claim victory here, but I think this is where I think some people like us and some people here who are from academia and can straddle academia and business have to come in and bring in that balance and say, listen, none of this is true. These are all very unfortunate paradoxes, but they are not paradoxes. They can coexist. We can work together. I'm going to be sitting here to make sure that we work together. And that's how you kind of then go ahead and move forward. And whenever there is an element of somebody who's playing that role of bridging that gap, bringing all of the 3-4 parties together, making sure that there isn't a trust gap, I think that's what ultimately leads to a successful partnership.
Yeah, really, really, you're right, Professor. Professor Kevin even said same thing, that we should put our guns outside the meeting room when we come here before talking at the same platform. It is indeed very important, because if you'd like to have a good collaboration of these 3 pillars, definitely we have to have this thinking that some level of trust. So your point is very well, Professor, that trust level should be there. But still what we find, we have very few examples. Let me quote Indian scenario. We have very few examples where philanthropists, they have donated for the universities in Indian scenario. So question arises that how can we encourage the philanthropy and the donations in the university so that we can have more universities like Jindal universities and other universities, and how come we can encourage this industry to invest in the community-based project by the universities? What kind of policy intervention and incentive mechanism should be considered that should prompt both industry philanthropy and the community engagement with this collaboration in terms of university? Would you like to highlight something, Professor Raj?
Yeah, I think there are many examples of that, at least that I'm familiar with in India. And I'm not sure that we do need a lot of policy interventions. Honestly, at least in the Indian context, there are enough policies in place where if you contribute to the kind of projects that you are talking about, that you get the usual tax benefits and incentives and so on. But where I do think, building on my earlier point, see, there are a lot of high net worth individuals, foundations, industry, funds that want to contribute, but they are wary. Will their money be used well or not, right? And one of the reasons that we have been very successful with the Indian School of Business, as well as with Ashoka University, as well as with Jindal, where your founder and vice chancellor would tell you that he had this idea, but while it was a great idea and people would be interested, at the last minute, they would not fund him till Mr. Naveen. Now, in each of these cases, at least what I have found is that there is money. People want to deploy those funds. They want to be associated with the founding of a new university. Now, there are not many countries in the world that you'd have a chance to do that as a private individual. And you can do that in India. And it's very heady to be saying, hey, I'm building a new university. So there is that opportunity to capitalize on private funds and wealth to endow a new university. But they want to give it to somebody who they can trust. They want to give it to somebody who will actually build a high quality university whose name can be associated with them. And so that's the first thing you have to solve for. You have to be able to convince folks that, hey, your money will be put to good use. I'm not going to personally benefit from it. And, the usual things that you do when you're funding an entrepreneur, right? That the entrepreneur is not going to run away with your money or build a product that is going to be B grade when all you want is to be associated with an A grade institution. So as you start to build that trust, then you actually find that there is almost a floodgate that opens of people wanting to then latch on to this project, because there are not too many such trustworthy projects around, right? So if you are one of the few and far between, then a lot of people want to fund you. And that's why, in India, we've sort of created this collective philanthropy model, where if you look at ISB, Ashoka, Kriya, these are all brand new universities that have been funded by a bunch of different entrepreneurs, and not just one, as in the case of Jindal. In the Jindal case, you were lucky that you had one entrepreneur who had enough wealth. But whether you look at Shivnadar University or Azim Premji University, these are all being funded by entrepreneurs. And this is not unlike what happened in the US in the 1700s. I'm not so familiar with England and Europe, but where universities were funded by rich entrepreneurs and still have their names on it, whether it's a Carnegie or whether it's a Stanford or Harvard. I believe I was just checking out the university of that Pier represents, and on Wikipedia at least it says there was a founder, and I don't know if he also endowed the university in the 1900s. So I think that opportunity is there. You just need to create projects run by people or entrepreneurs who are trustworthy. If you are trustworthy, people will give you the money because they rely on you to use their funds well and build something of high quality that they will in turn be very proud of.
So while you're answering this question, entire story of JGU, how it was built up, going back somewhere in mind, because Professor Raj, he used to discuss and tell the story that how come his idea was supported and funded by our Honorable Chancellor Naveen Jindal, and this institution has started. yes, it is important to develop that trust, that feel, so that we can get the money from the philanthropist and establish a university. It's indeed very important point which you have discussed, Professor, here. When we talk about building university, that's good. Building culture, that's good. But again, universities are working like a launch pad for the student entrepreneurs, through their industry academic collaboration. So what we find that students come, they spend time in the university, and university is actually providing like a launch pad to those entrepreneurial industry academia association. And that is so that work as testing ground, that is innovative ideas which may be developed and brought, and they can test it out. So what is the role of the universities and how they can create a larger community impact which can be affected to the society? So do the university are able to create this type of potential launch pad? What are the skills? What are the key things they require to make such a launch pad where they can skill up the students entrepreneurs through this industry and academia collaboration? Professor Smith. Sorry.
Okay.
Professor Smith.
Yeah, thank you. And good morning or good afternoon to colleagues in India. And first of all, to say thank you very much for the opportunity to take part in this very interesting symposium. And I've really enjoyed listening to my colleagues' views on this very broad topic. So the question you've asked me is about student entrepreneurship. And I think we've already heard in a whole range of answers from my other colleagues, elements of doing that. And I think it depends on a whole range of things, which I might touch on 2 or 3 areas. And it also depends on the level of the student. And for example, a lot of the concepts that we've heard already, the actual work between industry and academia will be being done by students. So for example, in many of the research projects that you described, PhD students will be a key glue that is allowing that to happen. And it's absolutely clear in the UK that there's been an increasing number of PhD students, both those funded with elements of government funding, but those also funded from industry directly, whereby the student is getting experience of the transfer of technology between the university and industry as part of their PhD project. In fact, one of the projects that I have to reflect on in my previous role, where I was the Vice Chancellor of Lancaster University, was a very interesting project whereby through European fundings when we were still part of Europe, that was encouraged SMEs to jointly fund PhD students. Because one of the interesting things is large industry, where many of their researchers do have PhDs, they understand the value of PhD. If you asked SMEs, do you think you need people at PhD level? If you ask them and they have no experience of working with a PhD, a very large percentage say those people are overqualified. When you give them exposure to a PhD student to show the skills that you have at that level of education and ask the question again, do you think you need people skilled to PhD level? The percentage shoots up. So what you don't have, you don't miss, basically. But once you know it, it becomes an important part. So that's point one. Point two is making your curriculum undergraduate level particularly, have elements where students, and it shouldn't be, all students should have the chance to be exposed to it, but you shouldn't say all students are necessarily going to be good at it or it's the right thing for you. So you've got to be flexible in your curriculum to allow people who it turns out to be the right thing to actually do that. So, and again, an example from my current university, University of Southampton, is we have a project called Future Worlds. And that's basically a level, and I liked what Professor Sinha said, whereby he talked about having people who can act as intermediaries. And what Future Worlds is, it has a few staff who actually, innovation and entrepreneurship is what they do, and they're good at making contacts. Because if you're a student and stuff, where do I go? Who do I need to talk to, etc. Even though I've got an idea, how do I develop that idea? And that's what Future World's about. What it does is it brings together people who can advise, but also it brings people from outside the university who have had that experience of starting up companies from scratch and telling people, this is what the experience is like, this is what you need to worry about, this is how you're going to have to develop your idea. So creating communities who are able to support entrepreneurialism, I think is really important. And I have to say, when I visit them, although it's much more difficult under COVID, all of the time students are coming forward and saying, how do we do this? And Future Worlds will support anyone from a first term undergraduate to a member of staff who has an idea, and therefore it's not directed. It's how good is the quality of your idea, and can we put you in contact with people. The third area I wanted to touch on is basically the role that government has to play in creating the environment for this. And there are two things I'd perhaps like to highlight back to you. Is one of the things that's been very successful, and I think this is a credit on our funding body, UKRI, particularly the EPSRC, is something called prosperity partnerships, where the project had to be jointly bid for by universities and industry, and industry had to match the government input it was being requested to make the project work, basically. And that means the industry has to have real skin in the game, and that develops real partnership. And all of the things that some of my other colleagues, such as Kevin and Pier said, and also Raj, leaving egos at the door, leaving the worst thing, what industry really hates is an academic coming in and saying, I know what's good for you. Do you really? And I think it's that mutual respect and being able to say we're going to solve this problem jointly. And that also applies to students as well.
Yeah, it's interesting, Professor, because the point which you have mentioned here, but again, it raised one question, that do you think that universities should enter into collaboration with industry before an professional course or industry-specific course is launched?
I think that I don't think there's any yes. I mean, that's not a yes/no answer. In the sense, though, I think that again, giving examples, I think that some industries are now looking to universities to run bespoke courses. Again, giving an example from my previous institution, one of the major supermarket chains wanted a bespoke MSc to look at how do you train all the managers across a massive supermarket chain about what responsible sourcing is of food. And therefore that had to be co-designed because it was directed to solve a particular problem. Again, in my current institution, we're looking all of the time to say, when you're looking at curriculum development, saying that academia is the only source of understanding what's the right thing to go into a curriculum is too narrow. Our graduates have got to go and work in the wider world, and I should also, we're focusing on industry. The other important dimension is, of course, the policy environment and understanding how policy develops. I mean, I don't want to deflect this discussion too much, but there's several dimensions of that. And therefore, when we look for curriculum renewal, what sources have you looked for that curriculum renewal beyond the academic? Because it's absolutely important that what we're teaching people makes it relevant to the sorts of role and job that people are going to go into.
Yeah, that's I think it's interesting, because as absolutely right, Professor Smith, there's no direct yes/no answer to this question, because its link is along with the learning and knowledge acquisition and connecting the holistic development of the learner, not by the academia only itself. It should be coming from the other side also. So I have one interesting question. Since we have now 3:44, I would like to take some question from the audience. So that's a nice question, and I would like to request Professor Pier to answer this question. It's a simple question which higher education person, one audience is asking. This question is that, do you believe that the higher cost of education could be an obstacle in encouraging students to take interest in community-based research and local opportunities?
Good point. Yes, education is a cost. It's a cost that is very variable. Higher education is very variable, depend to the country and depend to the different universities. As I said, I'm from a private university that has some tuition fees that I would say is much smaller than, for instance, the US system. But what is important, I totally agree with what Mark said. So when we start to design a new program, a new curriculum, we have to try to, I think it's one of the most complex activity for people working in academia. I mean, it is not difficult for me to enter and teach food microbiology, which is my topic. But it's much more complex to design a new program, in particular because we have to take in consideration the different components. We need to provide them an absolutely high level of knowledge. We need to provide the so-called hard skills. We have to provide all these concept of soft skills, and now we call them micro-credentials. So what is then the formal university formation? We have to include what is the willing and the request of the society. Do we need, in Italy, we have a tradition, we have too many people studying law, but we have a defined number of lawyers, and okay, they can work also. And sometimes we are lucky, for instance, in some of the STEM disciplines. People working in my sector, we graduate 100, and in less than 1 year, all of them are in the working companies. So it is, so we have to take in consideration the request of society. We have to request the needs of the entrepreneurs that are willing. So we have a very complex system in the designing a new program. And so the answer, can be a constraint, the cost of education. Yes, this is a problem, and that should be solved somehow, because having high quality education, unless it's formally paid is totally paid by the government, which is the case, or partially paid by the government. It is the case, for instance, in Belgium. In Belgium, all education is supported for European students, is supported by the government. So in this case, the university has a lot of space to develop new things. But in several other conditions where the university has to develop a new program, we need a lot of interaction. So try to design a program that can accomplish the request of the society, including the companies, to try to provide anyway a solid background, a basic background of culture and information, to learn the student, to teach the students, and to learn sometimes from the companies how to transfer the innovation. Because this is, let me say, I work in a high innovative sector for research, and sometimes I see that there are a number of constraints. So the high level innovation, most of the time, do not enter or do not exit from the very limited environment of a few very intensive research universities, or few transnational corporations, or even a few small startup companies. But there is, most of the time, there is no a spread of information in general society. So we have to educate our students to learn how to spread the technology information and the cultural information. It's not only a problem of science and hard sciences, the same is in finance or in culture. You can imagine in Italy how much is important the cultural heritage and to maintain all these archaeological sites. So we need really for doing that. And there are costs, and I think that is one of the topics that has been addressed also by Pramath, that we can increase as much as possible the donations. And let me say, I come from a country where donation to universities it is generally, and philanthropy, it is pretty limited. So different from UK, or different from even much more, I think, from the US system, philanthropy, it is not always, philanthropy is not directed to university by tradition, because the university are supported by the state, at least most of them. Being a private university, we had to develop a system to increase philanthropy. And one of the success we had, for instance, in one of the city of Northern Italy, which is Cremona, a totally new building, which has been supported by a foundation that depends on one of the biggest Italian companies producing stainless steel. And this, the owner of this company is a really philanthropic person. He is invested, joining together the culture, the university, the local interest. So being a company located in a medium small city of Italy, these three factors has led to invest several millions of euros for the construction of a complete new campus for 5,000 students in the center of the city. And I said also culture, because the campus is actually used to be an old monastery, a medieval monastery that was almost destroyed. So there is a combination of different factors. But engaging all these actors, the local government, the national government, the universities, the donors, is not a simple action. So we need also to create, and this is my last point, to create the competencies in the students to develop the models. The model that has been proposed by Kevin in Scotland, I think, is an exceptional model that should be applied, in which we have also to educate our students to become in the future the person that can, the people can interact between academia and entrepreneurs, just to increase this connection.
Well said, Professor. That's the key crux of the entire discussion even. One question here, that yes, we know that the ultimate objective of education to open the minds, because minds are like parachute. It's start work when it open. But the other side, that yes, the employability is a key issue. So yes, education should give, education will give an open mind discussion platform, but students, community, they got some sort, they require some sort of employability issues. So question is that how come academia and university can collaborate effectively in order to provide a positive impact on the employability? What do you think on this point, Professor?
Is it for me the question?
Yes, Professor.
Yeah, we try to be very short. We have developed a system of in the first step of developing, of designing a new program to put together the different stakeholders that are involved in that specific topic. If you are dealing with finance and actuarial sciences, we involve experts from academia, not only from our university, but also from external experts, in particular foreign experts, just to have a different view, because never forget that we have to provide all the tools to a new student to act in a globalized world. Okay, COVID has limited a bit our globalization, but we have to provide the tools to address, to work in an international environment. So to involve this and all together to try to design, and never forgetting that we have not to look in the next 2 years, but probably in the next 10 years. So having tried to have a foresight of the future that is always difficult. And that's the reason why to select key people, both in the university and in this stakeholder group, that can really look at what we expect in the next 10 years. It is essential for designing a successful program.
So in the last minute, few wrap-up questions, I would like to request Professor Grant to answer this specific issue. Now, this COVID-19 pandemic, it has forced many companies to move on all their work online. having a negative impact on internship. Where would you see the intersection between the internship, skill development, and employability going forward from this point now?
Okay, thank you very much for that, Krishan. We haven't actually seen what you're suggesting, that the internships have been hit hard. If anything, ours have actually enhanced and we've actually got more. How that's been achieved is through three different mechanisms. One was it's already integrated into the degree through some sort of applied consultancy project. So that was basically just switched online using Teams or Zoom. The other one is we used a dedicated platform called RIPEN, R-I-I-P-E-N, which comes from North America, Canada. And it's an integrated environment for any real project run by any organization, with groups of students from, say, Stirling, or groups of students, say, from Southampton, or groups of students from the Indian Business School. And we found that a very, very powerful tool for getting that real experiential learning. The key value add was it was linked to LinkedIn. So when the employers gave feedback about the students' confidence, presentation skills, professional demeanor, then they were able to actually give color codes, good, really good, and that then automatically fed into the student's LinkedIn profile. The third thing is our experiential learning we found online is a new norm. So whether or not we will go back to the traditional always face-to-face, I think it will be more blended. So the fact that all the students have been enhanced digital literacy skills, we're now building that into online, anytime, anywhere type internships, but as well as cultural experiences using something like Intern China or something called Pagoda, which basically allows our students to work in China, Mexico, Thailand, etc. And they're actually being able to get that cultural knowledge and cultural capital, albeit not face-to-face and feeling it, but we're trying to get that knowing, doing, and being part. So I think universities are very good at the knowing, because that's what we do, knowledge. Doing, we're getting better at in terms of enterprise and entrepreneurship. But what we're still struggling with is this being a professional in this new world of work. So to push back on your question, we've actually benefited from the pandemic, from placements and internships and voluntary work. We've not been disadvantaged.
Thank you, Professor. Last 3 minutes, and I have one more interesting question, and I would like to request Professor Sinha. That Professor Sinha, question is that what do you think that the university should concern itself directly with the question of employability, or should it focus more on strengthening the curriculum and research, which would be automatically take care of inclusion of employability skills of the student? What do you think, Professor Sinha?
I think you have to do both. And I think we do have an obligation, at least in a country like India, we do have an obligation to create outcomes for our students. And I think if you think about a curriculum, how does it evolve? It evolves based on what's happening outside. And that's really not just industry needs, but even the future of the world. Industry may not need young professionals to tackle climate change, but climate change is a huge problem for the world, and therefore the curriculum has to evolve. At the same time, industry needs do have to be taken into account, because most of our students do aspire to employment. Most of our students, even in the best universities in the world. You and I are part of essentially liberal arts universities, and you know that young middle class first time learners. My father used to tell me, after you come out of university, you need to earn 10,000 rupees a month, right? That was my goal. And so while I wanted to learn and I wanted to explore, I also had to meet that requirement. So I do think that we have to do both, and you have to again balance it. You can't, if you want to become purely about meeting industry demand, then you can't build a Jindal type of university, because you can't focus on learning also for sake of learning. If you focus only on sake of learning, then you will get a certain kind of student who can afford to devote all their time to contemplating life and the world. And that's fine too. But I think in general, you have to try and do both. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor. We are running at time. We have hardly 1 minute. So last 1 minute before summarizing the entire session, what makes the gap? There's a gap. Professor Smith, this question to you. There's a gap between the skill needed by the changing environment, industry environment, and something which is being imparted by the education institution. What measures can the university should take to bridge this gap? Professor Smith, last 1 minute.
Yeah, well, so very briefly, I think that, you've heard in the previous couple of answers, actually, that universities, over the last 10 years, this has changed out of all recognition, really, in the sense that the responsibility is to have a disciplinary, high quality offering, but an offering that doesn't embed within it transferable employability skills is not doing our students any favors. So you've got to do both. And I think if you hear what industry says, but everyone wants more. We're all greedy. We all want a bit more. But nevertheless, I think the employability of graduates is much, much higher on the agenda, and the things we put into the overall curriculum these days. If I look across our employability skills at Southampton, it's really putting the students front and center of what do they need, and employability skills has to be part, but not neglecting the quality of the education that they've come here to get.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you, Professor Smith. Indeed, it was great pleasure to hear from all of you. Definitely we have summarized here and discussed that how come we can bridge this gap between the industry and academia. We discuss on the issues of philanthropic and community impact and support, make students employable. And we are lucky to be a part of the JGU where Professor Raj is here, who has a vision. His vision, as a point I discussed, that yes, philanthropics, Professor Sinha says very well that yes, every philanthropists are ready to expand, but they are in dilemma. So we need a young mind like Professor Raj who can convince in the Indian scenario. We have discussed major challenges of industry and academia. I'm really thankful to all of you, Professor. You have tried to bridge that gap, and your suggestions definitely can be taken into account, and industry and academia interface will further strengthen. I'm really thankful to all of you for being your presence and putting light on this insightful session. Thank you, Professor. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, KK. And thank you so much, Mark, and for your time. Great to see you. Thank you very much, Professor Kevin Grant, and great Pramath. And of course, Professor Cocconcelli, such a pleasure to see you. I really enjoyed the discussion. It's been fascinating. So much was covered in 1 hour. So grateful to you for your time. I look forward to hosting you on campus at some point of time in the near future.